How much did former President Donald Trump pay in taxes? Well, in 2020, nothing. Big fat zero, nothing. How do we know this? His tax returns. Now, these tax returns were obtained after a Democrat-controlled panel on the House Ways and Means Committee voted along party lines, 24-16, to release them after a 6-year-long legal battle. So, what have we learned so far from the taxes? It turns out nothing that we didn't already know. We know there's a two-tier tax system in this country. We know that, generally the wealthier you are, the more ways you find out of getting of having to pay your fair share in taxes. So now, the system, of course, that really shows the system is rigged for the rich. Here we have an alleged billionaire paying nothing in federal taxes for the year of 2020. So that's what happened. And by the way, 2020 is not the only year they have records for. They have records for at least 6 years of taxes. And wow. So now, you're not going to be surprised that in some of those years, the average working class person actually paid more in federal taxes than Donald Trump. Amazing. The former president of the United States. So now, you could look at some of the years and focus in on 2020, right? So now 2020, you could say, look, COVID. COVID had obliterated businesses, the travel industry, and hotels. And, well, that's what, Donald Trump operates a lot of hotels and, golf courses. Okay, that's fair. That's a fair point. You'd be right. Donald Trump runs a golf course and hotel, a chain of them, and he's lost money. Sure, and a lot of businesses ended up suffering as a result of COVID-19. Which explains why Donald Trump did not want any sort of shutdown on the economy, because that would affect his properties, and it did affect his properties. So that's just 1 year, though. What about the other years? Well, it turns out the other years not exactly great either. In fact, the Trumps on their tax returns, that's Donald and Melania, reported a negative income in 4 out of the 6 years reported on their tax forms. That's amazing. Amazing. In 3 of those years, 2015, 2016, and 2017, the Trumps reported income tax liability of just $750. Wow. Their adjusted gross income, this is, pre-tax, okay, totaled a negative $53.2 million. Their total federal tax liability, including self-employment and household employment taxes, was $4.4 million. The only years that the Trumps reported a positive adjusted gross income were 2018 and 2019, reporting $24.3 million, and in 2019, $4.4 million. So the Trumps paid almost $1 million in taxes in 2018 and in 2019, respectively, paid $133,445. Okay, so, wow. The first thing I noticed before, as I said, alleged billionaire not paying anything in 2020. And the second thing I noticed is, again, along that line, those aren't billionaire numbers. I think it's pretty obvious. If you're only making $24.3 million a year and you claim to be a billionaire, those are rookie numbers, son. You have to pump those up. You're not doing very well. Now, the other thing is how much money they lost. Look at that. Negative $53.4 million. What a disaster. You're calling yourself a good businessman? That's a good businessman. That's your daddy, MAGA. Really? Really? I know there are still Trump hangers-ons who will say stupid things like, well, he was president of the United States, so of course he didn't make any money because he sacrificed it for the country, the good of the nation. Yeah, okay, Clan, sure. Explain then how Trump was still claiming tax benefits for losses in 2009 up until 2018. In September 2020, the New York Times reported that Trump was still facing an IRS audit, potentially tied to a $72.9 million tax refund in 2009, arising from $700 million in claimed losses that year. Wow. Really? Well, 2009, the financial collapse. It took out everybody. It took out everybody. That's what happened. Oh, okay. Well, funny, you were president of the United States, and so you had a little bit of, say over maybe regulating the banks to make sure that something like that doesn't happen again, right? I mean, you could have fixed that. Dodd-Frank, come on, Dodd-Frank, really? Not much of a fix. You could have at least advocated for, reining in the Wall Street and the bankers, but no, of course, you didn't. Okay, sure. Look, Donald Trump, we know, is a grifter. And not even a world-class grifter. From what we've seen from his taxes so far, if he were actually a decent grifter, he would have money. But he really doesn't. Instead, he has piles of debt and got massive refunds from the government and has basically been kept afloat by that, as well as loans from his friends in Saudi Arabia, or just declaring bankruptcy numerous times over and over again. And you have the Republican Party, members of it, that are still defending him, that are still protecting him. Speaking of protection, the panel's 29-page executive summary also shows the IRS had failed to do their job, failed to audit. This is a mandatory audit of Donald Trump's tax returns during his first 2 years in office, which skirted a requirement that dates back to 1977 following, of course, a controversy over former President Richard Nixon's taxes. So they found, the report did, that the IRS agents in charge of what were to be Trump's audits did not bring in specialists with expertise assessing the complicated structure of Trump's holdings. And they frequently determined that a limited examination was warranted because they hired a professional accounting firm. Because Trump had hired a professional accounting firm that they assumed would make sure Trump properly reports all income and deduction items correctly. So basically what they said is, look, Trump will audit himself. That's it. We'll trust Trump to audit his own finances and to report things. What? I'm sorry. The IRS expected Donald Trump, the serial liar, the man who has lied over 30,000 times as president, to be honest about his taxes? Really? Now, of course, the IRS never made such expectation because the person who led the IRS under Trump is a Trump loyalist. Somebody who Trump appointed. And of course, you've had years of Republicans continuously breaking down the IRS, weakening it so that it doesn't go after rich people, so that it goes after you and me, because that's the only people that it can go after. Again, we're not surprised by any of this. I told you, he's an awful businessman, and the records so far have proven it. But there is still more that has to be released, and that's a lot of the alleged criminal stuff. And the question, of course, is he a tax cheat? Looking at those numbers, I would say yes. Because, look, they're terrible numbers for an alleged billionaire. Either he had massively underreported his income, which is tax fraud, by the way, because you're underreporting your income in order to save money and not paying taxes and sometimes get a refund, which he did, and or overstating his losses. So that, again, he would not be able to report his correct income and pay the correct amount of taxes that he is supposed to owe. And that's in addition to being a terrible businessman in the first place. Now, that's not a crime itself, but the other stuff is. And being a terrible businessman, of course, would mean that he's more liable to do crime in order to keep his alleged status of, status of an alleged billionaire. Now, that said, when it comes to Trump, I don't think he actually cared about any of the criminal stuff or alleged criminal stuff because he has a history of getting away with it. And I think his taxes, the reality is, I think that his taxes showed that he's not as rich or as business savvy as he had claimed to be. And the reason that matters to him is because the ego is the only thing that matters to Trump. Remember, this is a guy who is dependent on being called the best. Being the best, the greatest at everything. In fact, nobody could ever be as good or as great as me. I'm a tremendous person, tremendously wealthy and successful. Everybody asks, how are you so successful, Trump? I don't know, good genes. Very stable genius. But he's not. He's not the greatest. He's not even good. He's run various failed schemes. Trump University is a good example. And other failed ventures, like, I don't know, Trump Air, Trump Steaks, Trump Water. Numerous other Trump ventures that just have not panned out at all. This guy bankrupted his own casinos. How much of a terrible businessman do you have to do to fail at a casino? The house is always supposed to win. And so, yes, when you, are a failure at legitimate business, what are you going to do? You're going to run illegitimate business. And probably shit on your taxes. And that's despite, of course, Donald Trump getting every advantage and break he could in the book. So now, I want to share one last thing, and this is a response from Trump's spokesperson. And I just think it's really funny. He called this is Stephen Shung, right? And this is him speaking to the Wall Street Journal. Sorry. He released the returns as an unprecedented leak by lame duck Democrats. The lame duck Democrats. If this injustice can happen to President Trump, it can happen to all Americans without cause. What average American working class person is going to have Congress specifically request their tax returns? That's not going to happen. What are you talking about? Oh, the IRS, they're looking into the most powerful man in the world. That means they're going to look into you next. No, you're not even on their radar, dude. Seriously. You're not the most to say that you're just like the most powerful man or the previously most powerful man in the country or in the world is anywhere close. Like if something bad happens to them, then automatically it must happen to you. It's just a ridiculous leap in logic. And I don't think anybody talks about that. Nobody talks about that. Okay? It's crazy. It's crazy. There's no reason for an average person to have Congress want to look at their taxes. Whereas Trump is a major public figure whose organization was just recently found guilty of tax fraud, conspiracy, and falsifying their business records. Weird. If there's any reason to maybe have his taxes looked at, it would be that. It would be that. And most importantly, too, him being president and having financial issues or possible financial issues, I mean, that's a matter of national security. Because who knows what decisions that he made, and if they were based on who had loaned him money in the past, or, whatever decision has to do with his having to service his creditors, whether that or not those are foreign creditors. And I think that's a really, really important thing that, once again, nobody talks about. It's a potential conflict of interest that shouldn't exist, and the American people should probably know about that. These conflicts of interest. I mean, they're talking about they're hyperventilating, I should say, about Hunter Biden, right? Hunter Biden, Burisma, and there's all the conflict of interest, it controls Joe Biden. Well, wait, Donald Trump has massive debts. all over the world, not just in the country, all over the world, because he couldn't get loans from American banks. You're not going to look into that? You're not going to look into how the Saudis have been funneling a lot of money to Jared Kushner, for example, $2 billion loan? Or all the other money that he received from the Saudis? Not going to look into that because, well, that's not a conflict of interest. But yet, Hunter Biden is, who was never in office. Republicans, you going to talk about that? No, of course not. No, the focus is just trying to take all the heat off of Donald Trump. Amazing. Amazing. But again, you had that conflict of interest. Now, the reason, okay, that you got to focus on that conflict of interest and really to talk about doing things like divesting from their businesses, which Donald Trump did not do. The reason that presidents normally would do that is so that they can fully represent the best interests of the people and not their own financial interests. Jimmy Carter had to divest from his peanut farm. I mean, he didn't have to. There was no law saying that. But they did so voluntarily so, that you could, at a minimum, try to avoid the appearance of a conflict of interest when it comes to being the president of the United States, the leader of the free world, and your own business interests. That's the minimum. And Donald Trump didn't even meet the bar. Not at all. Not at all. Now, the other fun thing, getting back to Jones' statement here, he added that the full release of the returns will reflect Trump's success as a businessman. Look at all the money he lost. You're going to call that a success? I mean, I guess if you look at success at, hey, I screwed over the government by not paying my taxes. Again, of course he spins it that way. He already has. Oh, I didn't, have to pay taxes. That's smart. It's called being intelligent and very, very smart. I don't pay my bills. It makes me smart. Oh, yes, Mr. Trump, of course. Very, very, very intelligent. Oh, yes. Doing tax fraud. Very intelligent indeed. Again, all that's alleged. But these tax returns really do give you an insight into, I guess, the possibility that he would do tax fraud to save himself money. Because losing that much money is that bad of a businessman. In order to keep up his lifestyle, yeah, you might have to fudge the numbers a bit. Are we surprised? No. Because what did we expect? The very same thing.